This is Deborah Atkinson, and you're listening to Flipping 50, where I address your top questions and struggles. I share what to eat, how to move, and how to think to get the energy and the vitality you want in the second and better half. And make no bones about it. We've talked about bone health, bone density, bone loss, sparing bone loss more than once here at Flipping 50, and it's probably a perpetual evergreen topic we'll come back to again and again. But my guest today has a really unique way of looking at bone density. So I'm selfishly really excited to unpack it all with her. Margie Bissiner is a physical therapist and integrative health coach. She's the author of Osteoporosis, an exercise guide. Margie is the creator of Move Today, a statewide exercise program in New Jersey, Happy Me, Happy Life, and Happy Bones, Happy Life online programs. Margie helps people achieve optimal bone and overall health through whole foods, exercise, mind-body relaxation techniques, and happiness training. She's a member of the New Jersey Interagency Council on Osteoporosis and an ambassador to the National Osteoporosis Foundation. Margie's implemented happiness training in her professional career for over 30 years. Margie, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much, Deborah, for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here.
And we can tell from your accent that you are so very authentic. And I love a good accent. I'm a sucker for that for sure. But I am just almost enamored with the whole idea of happiness and how that affects bones. So first of all, you're a physical therapist. You've really gotten into bones and bone health, and you are obviously very well connected and credible authority on the topic. How did you make the connection between happiness and bones?
Well, it's interesting, Deborah, because I actually got into happiness before I even got so involved with bones. I was in my 20s and I had just gotten out of a bad marriage, and I was working as a physical therapist with patients with chronic neck and back pain. And my patients were so unhappy and miserable. And they would say to me, Margie, you are so happy. What's your secret? And I thought to myself, if they only knew what I had just been through, they wouldn't be saying this. But the truth was, at that moment, I realized I was happy, and that true happiness is an inside job, and it's not based upon outside circumstances. So at that point, I started teaching my patients the tools I had used to help me get through the difficult situation. And then amazing things started happening. Neck pain, back pain started getting better so much faster. And my patients were enjoying life. There was a new spark to them. They had joy they hadn't had before. So I saw how powerful it was. Not only did muscles relax, but everything started getting better. And so from that point on, and that was over 30 years ago, I've made happiness a big part of everything I do with all my patients and people I work with. And, I've gone on to study positive psychology and gotten more training on happiness. But in terms of that, I had been doing happiness before I even got into bones. Then I had gotten into bones because there was a group of physicians who asked, was there anyone who could see their patients with osteoporosis? And this is way back. This is around 20 years ago. And then I started. And when I saw that, there were people who were doing things that really weren't safe, as I'm sure you know, with osteoporosis and exercise. And so I started delving into that. But the relationship, so I used happiness again, but the relationship is that there's actually research showing that there's a correlation between bone density and life satisfaction. So when they studied this group of people for over 10 years, it was 1,000 people, they saw that there was this correlation, and the people who were happier and had greater life satisfaction had much higher bone density. They didn't lose bone density as the other people had. So there's actually research on this. And then the second correlation is that stress, which is a little different than happiness, but it all ties together. There's research showing that stress, and not so much the stress you have, because everybody has stress, but how it affects you. And the stress hormone cortisol actually reduces the bone building cells, the osteoblasts. So it's so interesting because people will come in and, they care so much about, are they doing the right exercises and are they eating the right foods, and not realizing that the stress itself is a huge part, can really play a major role in osteoporosis. So we need to, besides the food and the exercise, we need to address, I address it both, the stress and the happiness, because I think it plays such an integral part. And the people I see are very stressed out. They really, people, I'm sure, as you work with as well. And that's just the world we live in today, but it doesn't have to be.
Excellent. And such an eye opener. So, listeners, I'm sure you can agree that, it's no surprise if we were to talk about stress and cardiovascular disease, or stress in cancer, stress in any number of diseases. But when it comes to bone density, I'm just willing to bet that for probably a high 90-something% of listeners, this is news that your happiness and or your stress level, that emotional component, are a piece of your bone density. So thanks so much for sharing that. So I also know that you talk about something called, this is a little bit scary, the happiness set point. So if we liken that to a weight set point, this is potentially not good. So tell me and define that a little bit. And then
Sure.
as the question, the natural follow-up about weight is, can I change that set point? So can we change the happiness set point?
Deborah, I love the analogy because that's so true. So science has found that we each have a happiness set point. And what that is, that's a fixed range of happiness that no matter what happens, we tend to return to this. So just like a scale, that you tend to hover around the same number unless you make changes. And so, but the good news is that we can change it, because they did research at David Lycan at the University of Minnesota. They studied twins and some were also separated at birth. And they found what makes this set point. And 50% was genetic and 50% was learned. But other researchers took it further and they found that the second 50%, that only, this is crazy, 10% was based upon circumstances and 40% were habits, like your thoughts, your feelings, your words, your actions. So just think of that. People think it's the circumstance that makes everything, but that's only 10%. And so there's the 40% that you can totally change. And then the other, and that you can learn habits to increase this. But even the 50% now with epigenetics, they feel you can make a difference. So doesn't matter where you start, whether you're a person that sees the cup as, half full or half empty, wherever you start, the good news is you can increase this by learning certain happiness habits. And that's I think it's amazing, because who doesn't want to wake up tomorrow a little happier than they are today? So it's good news.
For sure. I'm in. Right. I'm in. Definitely. All right. So come back and help me with the science. How does increasing our happiness affect our bones and overall health directly?
Okay, well, they've done studies, they did a big study on nuns, and they found that nuns actually lived 9 years longer. They had all their diaries, nuns that were happier. They found there's 35% reduction in colds, your immune system's better. Pretty much every aspect of health is improved with happiness. So, and as I said, your bones, they've done the correlation with bone density and happiness. But even if we take it a step further and think about a person that's happy, they're going to be so much more likely to be eating properly, exercising. When people are happier, everything flows easier, and it just makes a huge difference on their outlook. And besides what they do, it makes a difference. They've studied this, and it just helps every aspect of their health, including their bones.
Self-care components go up for sure. Okay, so in your happiness teaching, you talk about 7 pillars that are important for happiness. Will you share them?
Oh, sure. So we make it like a house. I like to have it like a house. So the first pillar is the foundation. And that's when every person has to take responsibility. And here's the key, that we're a victor in life and not a victim, because victimhood is the fastest way to unhappiness. It just robs you of your joy. And how do we know if we're in victimhood? By complaining, blaming, and shaming. Those are like the three ways that really take us out of being responsible. And it's like focusing on solutions instead of the problem. So that's step one, just the foundation and looking at, instead of what's wrong, what's right? How can I build upon that? The second pillar is the mind. And each of us has 60,000 thoughts a day. And guess how many percent is negative of that 60? What percent would you think is negative? Any idea?
Oh God, I'm going to hope it's not 50%. It's less than that.
Guess what? It's 80%. 80%
Oh my
of our thoughts are negative.
Terrible.
But if you think about the reason that is, it's because we're wired for negativity. So like way back in caveman days, we had to be worried if there was a tiger lurking. That was more important than if someone was being nice to us. So that's sort of how our brain's wired. I mean, think about that. If you get 20 compliments and one person gives you a criticism, what does everybody focus on? The criticism. So the next one was the pillar, the mind. And there's so much we can do to rewire our minds and start, becoming more positive. There's so many things. That's what's so exciting. The third pillar is the heart. So to have habits that are more heart-centered instead of fear and anger. So for example, like gratitude, forgiveness, loving kindness. Then you'll like the fourth one, the body. What can we do to make ourselves happy? So that would be exercise, nutrition, sleep, all the things that I know that you talk about. The fifth pillar is the soul, plugging into spirit. How can we connect ourselves to a power greater than ourselves and use that in our life to increase our happiness? And then there's the roof, which is life inspired by purpose. And then we have the garden, which is nourishing relationships. Who do we surround ourselves with? Is it gardenias and roses, or is it weeds? So those are the basic 7.
Very rich. Okay. So I want to come back to physical just for a second. So
Sure.
Say a little bit more about that. So I know that you said, what do we do to make our body happy? Now, what if somebody is not, or has not yet, so I'm going to leave the hope out there, has not yet bonded with exercise? What does that do? What effect does that have?
Okay, well, exercise, there's so many studies how exercise increases our endorphins and increases our happiness and increases really every part of feeling better and feeling alive in our bodies. So I think what I start with is just, first of all, they have to like their exercise, because I don't know if you see this as well, but so many people are, I have to exercise, and they put dread and exercise together. Well, you're sort of counteracting the effect. So I think it's so important that people enjoy their exercise. And that's always where I start. But it's, so there's all sorts of correlations between exercise and happiness, as well as overall health. Every part of the body is benefited with exercise.
Yeah, I'm so glad we brought that one back out though. So we're so on the same page. So I call it the joy factor, right? Not choosing because of how many calories it burns or how much fat it burns, but really beginning with something that makes you happy, that you look forward to actually doing it, not just look forward to having it done. And with bone density, you and I both know there are certain things that will lend itself to actually supporting bone density more. So you want to choose a good balance of those activities together with something that you enjoy. But that's such a huge piece of it. Looking forward to it, during it, enjoying it, not just after it's over. Love that. Okay.
You know what else? I know. So you do such a good job with that, and you really make exercise enjoyable with your videos and everything you've done. I think you're a master at that. But the interesting part with the exercise also is that because so often who I see are couch potatoes. And the only reason they've come to see me is because they had to, because they found out they had osteoporosis. And then when they get, even though strength training, we know how critical that is for bone density, and that's a huge part, but they start feeling stronger and they're able to do things, and it becomes enjoyable also because of the results. And it's just such a win-win in so many ways. So I agree. You do stuff you love and you incorporate those parts that you need to be effective.
Love that. Okay. So if we want to be better at anything, it takes practice. What kind of practices have you found to be the most effective in helping people increase their happiness?
I think there's a couple of things. As I said, with the foundation, just to reframe when something happens instead of, oh, poor me, and et cetera, to say, okay, what are the solutions? So that's one. And then the other things, and I'll give them 3 easy things that people on the call can do, the people who are listening can do right away. But I think with mindset, I think if we're so negative, if we wake up in the morning and this is awful and that's what's going through our minds, that's what's resonating. That's what we get what we put out there. And so what I like to do, there's 3 things that are easy. So in the morning, to start thinking, to start looking for the good, being a detective and what good already exists in your life and seeing what's good, because so often we do the opposite. We see what's not good. And so if you go in with that attitude, all of a sudden you'll start seeing things. And the more we see and appreciate, the more we get of that. But if somebody can't do that, then decide you're going to give yourself 3 awards. You're going to give out 3 awards that day, maybe for the nicest person, the prettiest flower, or the cutest dog, whatever it is, just something positive. So that's one. Number 2 then is that you want to savor when something good happens, you want to savor it for at least 20 seconds. So if someone gives you a compliment, instead of just saying, oh, it was nothing. Let's say you did a great presentation. Oh, it was nothing. You say, oh, thank you so much. I worked hard on that. I'm glad you got something out of it. Soak it in. Soak it into every cell in your body. If you see a beautiful sunset, absorb it. Don't just look at it and move on. Just take in the good. You were trying to magnify the good. And the third thing that's really effective is that when a negative thought comes, and yeah, you get negative thoughts, and we can't just push it aside. That's not the point. But what you can do is, okay, accept that, and then counter it, because we're biased for negativity, with 3 positive things that are true and exist in your life. And this is just starting to incline your mind to be more in the positive direction. And the more you do this, it's amazing. It's amazing, because I work with this all the time, how you can change your thoughts and start rewiring your brain for more positivity. And it's just very powerful. You see the world in a different light.
And I love that. And I keep coming back in my mind. I'm rolling that over and over. 80% of our thoughts are negative. On that. So I'm trying to bring myself forward into the present moment. But in terms of, online, I'm thinking I don't love every social media page and post that I see, but it is interesting. I find that sites like Positivity, where all they're doing is promoting a positive post or multiple ones per day. I mean, they're some of the most shared posts out there. I mean, we all crave it. However negative our thoughts might be, we all are craving positivity. So I'm totally resonating with everything you're saying. But let's say this. Let's say in the mindfulness that you're practicing and you're teaching, what if someone is just a little reluctant when they hear the word meditation? They're thinking, I can't do that. I've tried, or I don't know how to do that. I can't sit still that long. What would you say to somebody who's thinking that, or wants to stick their toe in the water, but that just doesn't resonate with them?
Well, I think a lot of people are terrified of the word meditation. And just a funny little thing, I decided, so I'm working, I decided, I guess it was 9 years ago, what happened, I signed up for this 8-week mindfulness meditation program. And the first class, we didn't do anything. The second class, I got a speeding ticket on the way to meditation. Can you imagine? And so it was really good though, because it knocked me in the head that I wasn't being honest. I wasn't practicing what I preached. And so I took this class so seriously. And I since then completely incorporated it into my life. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can start with deep breathing. There's so many different ways that you can do a type of meditation, even starting walking in the woods, being in nature. Each person is so different, and it's just sort of having that quiet time. And there's so many different ways you can do that. But in terms of, and for a lot of people, just listening to a pre-recorded meditation is a good way to start. So you don't have to sit in silence. So it really depends on each person. What I found is so many people were so reluctant. And once they tried it, and even a couple minutes, all of a sudden they're feeling more relaxed. They're able, because we all have stress. So by saying you're going to reduce stress, life is stressful. It's not so much the stress, it's how we react to the stress. So when you do these practices, even deep breathing, and all of a sudden you're not as affected by things. It's amazing. And so what I tell people is, start really slow. And there's so many different ways. And one of the things I've included as a free gift, I did this morning meditation. It's around 7 minutes, and it's a happiness meditation. And so it's just it just puts some of these happiness habits in your day so that and this is for everyone can have on who's listening, for all your listeners. And it's just a way of starting the day on a positive note. And there's also man, Jim Oliver, beautiful music in the background. And it's just a music that really is filled with positive energy. And it's, so that's a way you can start as well. But I think you shouldn't worry about it if it's stressful, I have to sit here. Well, that's totally counterproductive. And then you can start with other things that will still give you that peace, that relaxation. And, it doesn't have to be the sitting meditation. If you really feel, if that's something that's creating stress within you, that's certainly not where I would start.
Fantastic. I love that. So definitely in the show notes, I have the link to the free morning meditation that Margie so generously is sharing with us. And I put in quotation marks so it's only 7 minutes, right? So if you're thinking you have to sit there for 20 minutes with your legs crossed and eyes closed, you do not. And so be sure to come in, check out the show notes today. And then Margie, I really want to ask you a question. We've unpacked so much, and it's mind-blowing to me that the happiness and bone density connection is such a strong one. And it's not that it doesn't make sense. It's just that very few people are having this conversation. So I love that you are and that you've shared it with us. Is there a question that I should have asked you that I missed?
I think you did a great job of making the correlation and how important it is. And the good news, though, I just do want to share with your listeners how the good news is that I have seen such great results with the combination of the exercise, the nutrition, the happiness, and stress reduction. And people are increasing their bone density naturally. So when you do the combination, it's amazing. And usually it might be every 2 years that people get a bone density test. So you don't know. It's not like you'll get a reading on your blood sugar. Oh, this is improved, or your digestion feels better. You don't get the feedback right away. But the good news is, because I've been doing this for so long, the results are really good. So all of this works. So your exercise, Deborah, and the nutrition and the mindset and it really makes a huge, and you'll feel better. Who doesn't want to just feel better and not have that dark cloud walking, trailing behind them? Or who doesn't want to just wake up feeling, a little happier and having more joy in their life? So it's all good. It's so, I tell people it's like a reset. People are like so upset. Oh my God, I found I have osteoporosis. And I look at it that, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity because it's not just the bones, usually other things also, to just stop, see what areas you might be ignoring, And then you can change those and you can then improve them. So the rest of your life, you feel better. I'm sure as you've seen with exercise and the work you do, it's amazing how much people's lives improve. And so it's the same thing. It's like, okay, let's just look at it as a reset and an opportunity to move beyond and improve all of those things. So the other thing one last thing I wanted to say is, in addition to the meditation, I have a 7-day happiness journal, which just gives you different habits to do on 7 days. That's also in the link that will be in the show notes. So I included that as well, just to give you some more things that you can get started on.
Fantastic. What a package. All right. Thank you so much. And listeners, do you have a question? Leave it below the show link at flipping50.com/happiness. I love to hear from you, and Margie, I'm sure, would as well. If you have a question for her, if this episode was helpful, please leave a rating in iTunes and then share it with a friend. Surround yourself with a supportive community of women on the same journey. To get the most from this week's episode, check out today's show notes at flipping50.com. Again, that's /happiness, where you'll find the juicy download Margie talked about and resources that we've mentioned on the show and connections that you can take your bone density and your happiness one step further. What are you waiting for? Let's start flipping 50 together.